Hey everyone and welcome back. So far, we have been building with OpenAI and switched with Google ones. You saw that switching with providers in Datapizza AI is fairly easy. You don't need to rewrite your entire code base, just a few lines of code. But what if you want to switch providers programmatically or frequently when your application is running? Or maybe you need to load from configuration which provider to run. With Datapizza AI it is straightforward, and that's exactly what we are going to explore today. By the end of this video, you will be able to swap LLM providers extremely easily, and we will also look at running models locally or basically any OpenAI compatible provider. Let's dive in. As we saw in the first episode, every provider has its own client class. OpenAI client, Google client, and so on. Now, switching between one provider and the other just requires changing the constructor. So we use the Google client, for example, instead of the OpenAI client. While this type of direct configuration is effective, there is a much cleaner way to do this if you need to swap provider frequently or maybe load from configuration. And this is where Client Factory comes in. Client Factory is a clean and scalable approach that abstracts all provider-specific details for you. Quick note, as I explained before in the first video, if you're using any other provider that is not OpenAI, you need to install it separately. We have OpenAI installed by default. We installed Google in the first video, but now I want to show you an example that also involves Anthropic. So I'm going to install Anthropic too. So, to install Anthropic, I just need to do the same as I did with Google. In this case, we are installing Anthropic clients. So I just need to run pip install Datapizza AI clients Anthropic. And here it is. Now we can use Anthropic clients. Okay, so as you can see here, this is how we implement a basic client factory. So we are creating the same OpenAI client as we did before, but using the client factory instead of the actual OpenAI client. So we just need to invoke from client factory the method create, passing a provider, the API key, which I have in the environment, and the model. So basically, the same parameters you would use when creating a normal client. Now I can add more than one provider just by doing the same thing for every provider. In this case, I have an Anthropic client and a Gemini client. So these three clients were creating using the same exact constructor. So that's what makes it easy. In this case, I have for every client the right provider, the right API key, so I'm assuming you have your API key in the environment, and the model. Now, for the provider, you can either use the provider object, as we have here, or you can use a string. So I can do exactly the same by passing a string, so OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, so same exact code, but using a string, and it will work. This is useful because maybe you have your providers and other variables set in an environment. This may be better for your case because maybe you have all your providers set in an environment variable or maybe in a YAML configuration. So if loading a string is easier for you, you can just do this. Now I can build a prompt and give it to each one of these clients. Now I can run this code and invoke all of these clients. So now here I have an error because the parameter temperature is not supported with this model and it was thrown by the OpenAI client. This is because it is clashing with our default temperature that is set by the client factory. So I can just set it right here, temperature, none. Okay, let me run it again. And as you can see, all the three clients responded. OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. And we use the same interface for all clients. This way, you can control everything using environment variables, configuration files, and so on, making your code much cleaner, scalable, and stable. Now, let's get to the next topic. Sometimes you want to run local models maybe for privacy, cost saving, or you don't want to depend on an external API. That's where something like Ollama comes in. There are a lot of local LLM frameworks like Ollama, as I said before, VLLM, Llama CPP. In this example, we are going to use Ollama because it's one of the most popular and easiest to use. But you can basically configure this to work with everything. Now, with Ollama, we can run local models like Gemma, Qwen, Llama. And the best part is that Datapizza AI makes this extremely easy. So, for the first step, we need Ollama up and running. You can just head to ollama.ai and use the installation method for your OS. Now, I am going to assume you have Ollama installed. When you have Ollama installed, it should automatically start up. If it doesn't, you can just start it with Ollama serve. Now, let's say I want to download a Qwen model, the 4B variant of Qwen. So you can just do Ollama pool Qwen 3 column 4B. Now Ollama will download our model and put it on our device. This may be a lengthy process depending on how big is the model you are downloading. Okay, now that I have the model, I need to do one additional step. As I said, for each provider you need to install the appropriate package in Datapizza AI. Now Ollama is technically not an external provider, but we need to install something additional, and this is the OpenAI-like client. So we just need to do pip install Datapizza AI clients OpenAI-like. Why OpenAI-like? because Ollama exposes an OpenAI compatible API. Here's the important part. This approach works for Ollama, but it will work for any other OpenAI compatible provider, like VLLM, or also remote providers like DeepSeek, Cerebras, and Grok. Basically, in most of these cases, you just need to put the appropriate base URL, and everything else will work as intended. In this case, we are using the OpenAI-like client to run Ollama. We are just setting an empty API key, because Ollama doesn't need that. The model, we are using the same exact one we have downloaded before, and then setting a simple system prompt, and in the end, the base URL. Base URL is fundamental because it tells the client where the Ollama instance is, or where the OpenAI-like instance is. So, as I said before, we are not constrained to Ollama. In this case, the default URL for Ollama is the local machine, so localhost, at this port. Now, I should have everything set up to invoke the Ollama client and do some queries. So, let's try to run this. And here we have our response. So this may take quite a bit of time. It depends on the specs of your machine and how big is the model. Now you can play around with this. You can, for example, change the model here in this string. Obviously, you need to have a certain model installed if you want to use it. You can change the system prompt, as always, and you can also change the base URL if you have Ollama on another machine, or maybe you want to use another provider like Cerebras, for example. And as you saw, running local models with Datapizza AI is very easy. We basically use the same interface as we did before, but using a model that is running on my laptop, which is amazing in my opinion. Now, let's do a quick recap. We have covered the client factory for a configuration-driven, cleaner provider selection. We also explored how to work with OpenAI compatible endpoints, meaning running local models and also using other external providers that run using the OpenAI standard. We have also explored how to use OpenAI compatible endpoints, like Ollama and VLLM for local models, or remote providers like Grok, Cerebras, and DeepSeek. As always, you can look at the official Datapizza AI documentation for more information. The big takeaway here is the power of a clean and unified interface. So, if you are enjoying this series, leave a like and drop us a comment, or if something's not working, drop us a comment anyway and we will help you. So see you in the next one. Bye.